Well, indeed. Blessed be the name of the Lord. And the more I think about that, it's what a wonder to be able to see Him face to face. Job chapter 18 through 21. This is the completion of the second round of speeches. There will only be 2 more speeches by the friends after this. Zophar gives up. And we're all going to applaud that Zophar gave up and decided not to give his third speech. And then Job will give a conclusion to his speeches. And so I'm excited to, as we move on through this, to see Job's evolution in some way of how he is thinking, what is going on in his mind. Just a reminder for many who are Christians, and especially if you're younger, but not necessarily only if you're younger. You have not necessarily gone through a severe trial. We have many trials, M-I-N-I, many trials, oftentimes, and we can see the light at the end of the tunnel. We can see how things will be resolved. But there are those occasions in life where it is difficult, if not impossible, for us to rectify or realize or see the light at the end of the tunnel. And it's impossible to know, how will this end? Will this end? Will it end in my death, possibly, and not necessarily be resolved in this life? This is where the book of Job comes in, and all the poetic literature for that matter. Psalms, Ecclesiastes are very important, but Job is monumentally important to know prior to the big trial, prior to a very difficult trial that comes, much less those smaller trials that end up on the way. A lot of times what God is doing in smaller trials is beginning to prepare us for a big trial and get us accustomed to turning to Him, getting used to putting our dependence on Him. When you do not know the poetic literature, and when you do not know the book of Job well, a trial will come that will crush you. You will turn in desperation. The Proverbs, chapter 1 of Proverbs, warns us to prepare and get ready for that. Because if we do not get ready, if we do not prepare ourselves with wisdom, when the trial hits, we will cry out for help. And it will not be there because it's too late. Simply put, you cannot buy fire insurance on your house after your house burned down. It is extremely important that you buy it ahead of time. And knowing God's Word is a way of buying the insurance ahead of time and being prepared. So I can't emphasize this enough. Certainly, I'm giving you introduction to it. We're not hitting every single detail, but hopefully it urges you to go back and read carefully, mark it for yourself, figure out things. I need to know that. I need to remember that when these severe trials come. It will be of invaluable help for you at that time. So that being said, with this introduction, we're going to see the speeches of 2 of the friends, Bildad, then Job will answer, then Zophar, and Job will answer, chapter 18 through 21. If you have your Bibles open, please, because this will be primarily from the text. I may ask you a few questions here and there as to how, so a few things that I'll ask you to take a look at and see. So Bildad then answers in chapter 18 and verse 2. He says, "How long will you hunt?" Let's see. Before I do that, let me give you just a little introduction to this. I'm sorry, I forgot this. The big question that is going on here between Job and the friends are, what are the rules by which God runs the world? You know, if you ask the average person here today, most of them would have a pretty good answer. about how God runs the world, and it would mostly be in line with these friends. We could summarize that as retribution theology. In other words, when God sees people that are evil and doing bad things, eventually He's going to do something to them. They are going to get retribution for their actions, and if you live a good life, then you are going to be rewarded in this life, and things will go well for you. Now, there is a general rule like that in the book of Proverbs. Live wisely, and generally speaking, you will have less problems in life. Doesn't always happen. Ask Job. He'll tell you. And then also, if you live foolishly, generally speaking, there will be some consequences that will take place in life. Violating God's rules in life, like trying to see how many times you can cross a 8-lane freeway without getting hit will probably not work out real well for you eventually. And so there's just ways that you can see consequences to that. But this is what they're arguing, and the friends are saying, Job, it's obvious you're the most wicked person we've ever known, even though we never saw you sin, really, but we're seeing what God's doing to you, and that automatically should gives us the answer. Now, I would believe that Job likely had the same belief prior to his trial. And we can see that a little bit in how he answers, because he's so confused as to why God has turned against him, knowing full well that he has not turned to sin, he hasn't rejected God. And so now his just total confusion. What's the answer? Why is this going on? He's asked the question why many, many times. And so the bottom line is, as we read these particular speeches, we're going to be asking the question, really, how can anyone know for sure that any specific suffering that happens has a reason we can identify? That isn't always the case. Sometimes, certainly. Well, you live that way. This is the consequences of living that way. You could see some of that, but it's not true every time, and God's answers are more complicated than that. And then I threw this in. Who would have thought that the suffering that Job is enduring is actually a result of God's confidence in Job himself? That's shocking, isn't it? At some point, it just hits you. Sometimes way into the book, it just hits you. Wait a minute. This is all happening because God has confidence in Job. That Job is going to uphold him. God doesn't want to lose this battle with Satan. And he's putting absolute confidence in Job that way. And he will praise him to the heights when Job passes the test and never revokes God or turns away from God. So it's a beautiful thing, and we're going to start with that, and then as we come to a conclusion, I think you're really going to be enriched, as I was, in studying this particular section. Okay, so Bildad's second speech, and we start here then with just a summary. It's another great description of what happens to the wicked, and from the point of view of Bildad, which it's just a repetition practically, but in different ways and different words. Start here first off with just 1 through 4, and Bildad says, "How long will you hunt for words? Consider, and then we will speak." In other words, you know, if you just be quiet, we could talk, and we'd just you would just do yourself a big favor to just be quiet and listen to us. Just consider, we'll speak, and you will be enriched. At that particular point, Job is doing this. Here we go again. These three guys cannot keep their mouths shut. Verse 3, he says, "Why are we counted as cattle? You just treat us like beasts, like we're stupid in your sight. You treat us like we don't know anything. Well, you just keep saying the same thing, and you never answer me." I can imagine Job answering to that in his mind. And he says, "You who tear yourself in anger, shall the earth be forsaken for you, or the rock removed out of its place?" Now, consider what he's saying here is that God has a rule by which the whole world is governed. And it's real simple. Do wickedness, suffer. Do goodness, don't suffer. I mean, that is. So you just, here's Job, you just want the whole foundation of how God rules the world changed just for little old you. Aren't you special? The arrogance is gone completely out of control here as you see them saying these kinds of things. Then in verses 5 through 21, this is the rest of it. Notice this setup here in verse 5. Indeed, the light of the wicked is put out, and the flame of his fire does not shine. All right, so at one point, the wicked has light. They have a strong flame. Everything looks powerful and good, but it's not going to endure. So you can see they're answering Job by saying, oh yeah, I know, you're going around talking about I used to be prosperous, I used to be all this happened. And he goes, well, that's the way it happens with wicked. You know, it's not that the wicked always have bad things happen, but it is that eventually it's all going to happen bad for them because God always puts their light out no matter what. So there is that. That's the argument. Now, look at some of the words and how he does this. Verse 7, he goes on to describe what happens to the prosperous, wicked person. His strong steps are shortened, and his schemes throw him down. So because of he seems so strong, but his schemes are going to overthrow him. For he is cast into a net by his own feet, and he walks on its mesh. A trap seizes him by the heel. A snare lays hold of him. A rope is hidden for him in the ground. A trap for him in the path. Terrors frighten him on every side and chase him at his heels. His strength is famished, and calamity is ready for his stumbling. It consumes the parts of his skin. The firstborn of death consumes his limbs. You're going to see how Bildad is just looking at Job and saying, let me see if I just describe you. I describe what I'm looking at here, and that will be equal to how the wicked are. So verse 14, he is torn from the tent in which he trusted and is brought to the king of terrors. In his tent dwells that which is none of his. Sulfur is scattered over his habitation. In other words, he's stored up all kinds of things he didn't deserve. His roots dry up beneath, and his branches wither above. His memory perishes from the earth, and he has no name in the street. It's not going to be long, Job, where nobody's gonna remember you. You're just that bad. You're gonna die, and it's all going to be over. And so verse 18, he is thrust from light into darkness and driven out of the world. He has no posterity, so you're going to leave this earth with nobody or progeny among his people, and no survivor where he used to live. They of the west are appalled at his day, and horror seizes them of the east. Surely such are the dwellings of the unrighteous, such is the place of him who knows not God. Well, that's, I don't know how much crueler you can get than that. Is just a pointed statement. And if you feel where Job is, remember, he is listening to this, and he's going to point out in his speech, his bones are sticking out. He is so thin. He has boils all over his body. He looks horrible. You ever had one boil? It's like right here on your cheek or something, or on your, I haven't, fortunately, but I've seen those and known those who have, and it just distorts your face. Just imagine his whole body just distorted. He's oozing. It's horrible. His agony and pain. And they just look at him and go, wow. couldn't anybody be more disgusting than what you are? And this is a perfect example of what that's like. So I just wrote, well, you Google the word wicked and you'll see a picture of yourself in the dictionary. That's really what wickedness looks like, pure and simple. And those last words, such is the place of him who knows not God. This is the greatest fear Job had, that God was no longer with him. This is what he can't understand. And I love that. We've mentioned that before, but I love that because it is an indication of how much Job loved God, relied on God, placed his life in God. And then to think that his best friend, the one he could rely on all time, had suddenly turned against him is beyond agony. And you will not see him talking so much about his own pain physically as he does about the pain inwardly in his spirit. And this is the answer we're looking for. What happens when I feel that way? What happens when it just seems so hopeless and I'm wondering, is God going to answer? So it's a good question to ask, and the book of Job will answer that well. All right, let me stop for a moment. Questions about this text or any further comments? I don't want to run past this too fast. Michael?
It seemed like verses 5 to 21, I don't know, if you read it in the book of Proverbs, I wouldn't bat an eye. But then here, because it's said in the way it's said to and said,
yes.
It speaks to that exception to the rule.
Yes, good comment. That's the thing. A lot of the things, and Michael brings something very important as you read Job, you have to realize that a lot of the things that you're going to read, that we read, are true under certain circumstances. But they're not universally true, and there's certainly not true concerning Job. But if you read this in Proverbs, you would know the theme of Proverbs is act this particular way, and generally speaking, and I emphasize generally speaking, here will be the end result. And on the other hand, act and live this way, and generally speaking, you will have a different outcome. Only generally speaking. Yes, Emily.
It's important for us to not put ourselves in the place of God and executing judgment and saying, this happened to you, so that's what it means.
Yes.
Like we use the world around us and the Bible to interpret what we see, and you can only, and everybody has to do that throughout their life, but we need to leave room for grace and for God to be the one who's really making the determination on, this is wicked, you are sinful. That's not my job.
Yeah.
And here they do it, and even though if we did take a look at that and say, oh, that's very similar to Proverbs that we see, they interpreted it wrong.
Yeah, good. James chapter 4 points this out. Who are you to judge your brother? You are not the judge. So be very, very careful at drawing conclusions from the things that are conclusions as to whether or not a person is right with God or not right with God, because the same events happen to both. And Job is going to stress this as he gets to his speech here. Yes, Adam.
I think part of what we need to remember is that's a sign of God's mercy, that we are given an opportunity to come back to him. That if God dealt with everyone the exact same way, and that exact same way was what God would deserve, which is kind of what the friends are saying.
Yeah.
Well, we deserve death, and so as soon as anyone sins, that's the end. You don't get an opportunity. We actually depend on God having a varied response to sin to give us the grace and mercy.
Yes.
It gives us enough time to come to faith.
Yeah, good. And we might summarize that with 2 Peter 3:9, where God is not willing that any should perish. One of the reasons it seems like he's waiting a long time before his return, but he's not willing that any should perish, but all should come to repentance. And that is God's great desire. We're not looking at a God who is looking at us as if we're hanging on the edge of a cliff and he's stomping our fingers to see how long we can hang on. We're looking at a God who has his arms out, his hands out, trying to bring us back to him. It's the most important thing that he can be. Why else? He is our Father. He is our Creator. Who else would he be? Certainly one who has that love. Good comments. Let's take a look at chapter 19 then and see Job's reply here. And we'll just start with the first 6 verses in which he addresses the friends, and then we'll see his speech. And he says, beginning verse 2, "How long will you torment me and break me in pieces with words?" Again, he's answered the last one the same way. Now he's answering this. How long are you going to keep doing this to me? These 10 times you have cast reproach upon me. Are you not ashamed to wrong me? And even if it be true that I have erred, my error remains with myself. If indeed you magnify yourselves against me and make my disgrace an argument against me, know then that God has put me in the wrong and closed his net about me. So, look at a few things here. Job simply says, look, for one thing, you're just adding to the pain that I have. All you're doing, these 10, quote unquote 10 times, he keeps, you've just kept doing this. But even if I've erred, that's between me and God. Who made you the one who's supposed to come and render this further punishment on me? Because that's what you're doing. That is not in your prerogative. That is not your right. And Job hits the nail on the head here, because in chapter 42, God's got a few words he's going to say to these friends that are not going to be pleasant for them to hear, because they have heaped this pain upon him in this way. So you magnify yourself against me. You bring this argument to me, but it's God. This is God. If you want to answer somebody, I would appreciate it if you would start questioning God and ask him why this is going on, because that's my question. That's my question. Please come and answer the question. Okay? Now, let's look then beginning in verse 7. And you'll notice how he begins this description of all that God has done to him. So I'm going to read this, and I'd like you to, as I read, just spot different things that you see that Job says that are shocking or wow or just stand out to you. All right? So we'll just talk about a few of those things. Verse 7. He says, "Behold, I cry out violence, but I'm not answered. I call for help, but there's no justice. He has walled up my way so that I cannot pass, and he has set darkness upon my paths. He has stripped from me my glory and taken the crown from my head. He breaks me down on every side, and I'm gone. And my hope has he pulled up like a tree. He has kindled his wrath against me and counts me as his adversary. His troops come on together. They have cast up their siege ramp against me and encamped around my tent. He has put my brothers far from me, and those who knew me are wholly estranged from me. My relatives have failed me. My close friends have forgotten me. The guests in my house and my maidservants count me as a stranger. I become a foreigner in their eyes. I call to my servant, but he gives me no answer. I must plead with him with my mouth for mercy. My breath is strange to my wife, and I'm a stench to the children of my own mother. Even young children despise me. When I rise up, they talk against me. All my intimate friends abhor me, and those whom I've loved have turned against me. My bones stick to my skin and to my flesh, and I have escaped by the skin of my teeth. What are some of the words he uses that pop out to you on that. Maybe words that you say, Job, you don't know what you're talking about. Maybe words that you say, I'm aghast at how he is feeling right now and the challenge he's going through. Some of the things you notice.
Well, in 8 through 12, it's all that he's on that word. And, my honor, move my crown, bring me down, uproot my hope, and anger burns against me, his troops advance in force. So it's like he feels like God ignored it.
Yeah, good. So what you see through the whole thing, just Christy said, he feels like he's just in a battle with God and he's lost. God has all the troops. God has all the power. God has all this. What do you expect me to do? I have no strength here. He has taken away every single thing I could imagine that would be a blessing. Right down to my own brothers, children who are young children on the street look at me and go, it's horrifying. Jerry.
Yeah, that's kind of the dramatic, tragedy of it, is he talks about God being at war with him, God's his enemy, and then he lists all these different categories of people that have abandoned him in every way. And that's kind of the tragedy and the irony of it, is God's actually the only one that hasn't abandoned him.
It hasn't abandoned him,
And that's, I think, what probably hurts the most.
Yes. And I would add, probably we need to be careful not to say Job feels that Job is not casting on God and saying, I'm your enemy. What he's saying is, God has acting as an enemy to me, as if I'm his enemy. That's the problem, because Job isn't giving up on God. And we're going to see that a little bit later. He's not giving up. He still loves God. He still trusts God in many ways. But he is just, why are you treating me as an enemy? All of this, why would you take all of this away? But you want to get into the spirit of how he's feeling and how this is going on, because there's going to be, suddenly Job is going to turn around and go, wait a minute, I still hope in God. I don't know why he's treating me, but I still hope in God. So that's a blessing. Anybody else? Something there that stood out to you? I think verse 11 probably is the one that struck me the most. He's kindled his wrath against me and counts me as his adversary. Wow. He's kindled his wrath against me. Go ahead.
One of the things we said in studying this is it's helpful to see the bad example of their friends as a warning or a watchword that we are better friends to those going through trials. And kind of piggybacking a little bit on Jared's comment, everyone has abandoned him. I think it's important for us to remember, when we know people dealing with trials, likely not as severe as Job.
No.
But that doesn't mean they don't feel like they're severe. And that those people likely feel alone. It's the responsibility of the family here to make certain that people don't feel alone.
Yes. Good observation. Make sure that, because people are going to feel very, very alone. More than once I've had somebody call me who's going through a similar trial as I have gone through and ask me questions, and then at the end made statements that I couldn't correct. I just had to let them find it out for themselves, if you understand what I mean. But it was statements like, I know God's going to fix this. No, not necessarily. God's not necessarily going to fix it. God is there, and God will do what God wants to do for your good. Everything will be to your good and to your glory and His glory. But He's not going to necessarily undo what happened. Job's not going to see his 10 children again. That's not going to happen. So there's a lot of things that they're not reversible. Trials don't reverse, but they have a purpose, and we trust God. And that's what he's going to get at toward the end. So being aware of that. Good observations. Look then at verse 21. He turns, by the way, one lesson here I wanted to point out. Those who suffer are often not respected. Something about going through a severe trial, some people around you will interpret that. They won't say it in so many words, but they will interpret that as, oh, I've just figured out that you're not such a great smart aleck, that you thought you were. You're not so wonderful as I thought maybe you were. Look what's happening to you. Well, you weren't so smart, were you? It's just amazing some of the things that will come out of people's mouths. Verse 20 through 22, notice his stop and he pleads with his friends. Have mercy on me. Have mercy on me, O you my friends. For the hand of God has touched me. Why do you, like God, pursue me? Why are you not satisfied with my flesh? I love the New Living Translation says, haven't you chewed me up enough? That's a pretty good way of summarizing it in a paraphrase type thing. Have you chewed me up enough? Then he turns now to verse 23 through 27. He says, oh, that my words were written. Oh, that they were inscribed in a book. Oh, that with an iron pen and lead they were engraved in the rock forever. For I know that my Redeemer lives, and at the last he will stand upon the earth. And after my skin has been destroyed, yet in my flesh, or some versions, as I'll show you, yet after or from my flesh or without my flesh, I shall see God, whom I shall see for myself, and my eyes shall behold, and not another. My heart faints within me. Wow. What a breath of hope. He just gets to a point, and before he was asking all kinds of things, now he gets to this point where he goes, look, I just wish this were inscribed on a rock, that this was inscribed with an iron pen, so that when the day comes, I can be vindicated, I can be justified, that I was not turning away from God, and this was not a result of anything I had done. Job, congratulations. Millions have read it. Kind of sweet, isn't it? Fact of the matter is, Job is the most read book in the Bible by unbelievers. It's taught in universities as literature, in English literature. It's such an amazing book. So, there you go. Yes, Job. It's been written in an iron pen that everybody can see. And then his hope, I know my Redeemer lives. And that's an old song that we sing. Just note, New American Standard Version, NET, and NIV footnotes, yet from my flesh, which makes more sense in this. That seems to be closer to the Hebrew. Some translators looking at it one way or the other, not real sure there. But it seems in this text, he's not talking about his resurrection. He's just talking about the day's going to come that even after I die without my flesh, after being separated in that, my Redeemer lives, and he's going to justify me in this particular situation. My heart, it faints within me. I wondered about what that really means. Is this a gasp? Is this the last breath that I can take? This is my last hope. I think that's basically the idea that he's given there. And then these last two verses is another warning to the friends. If you say, how will we pursue him? And the root of the matter is found in him. Be afraid of the sword. For wrath brings the punishment of the sword, that you may know there is a judgment. Look, friends, it's about time you got careful of what you're saying. There is a judgment. I know that. There is a judgment, and God will avenge. So be careful. You need to be quiet. Well, good. Zophar won't speak. No, Zophar will speak. So this is me quick. It's another wonderful sermon on what happens to the wicked. It's a perfect description of Job's condition, though it's fairly lengthy. We'll just read through it. I'll note a few things. Therefore my thoughts answer me because of my haste within me, just like I couldn't wait to say something to you. I hear censure that insults me, and out of my understanding a spirit answer me. You've been insulting me. Do you not know that this from old, since man has been placed on earth, that the exalting of the wicked is short, and the joy of the godless but for a moment? Though his height mount up to the heavens and his head reach to the clouds, he will perish forever like his own dung. Those who have seen him will say, where is he? He will fly away like a dream and not be found. He will be chased away like a vision of the night. The eye that saw him will see him no more, nor will his place any more behold him. His children will seek the favor of the poor, and his hands will give back his wealth. His bones are full of his youthful vigor, but it will lie down with him in the dust. Though evil is sweet in his mouth, though he hides it under his tongue, though he loathes to let it go and holds in his mouth, yet his food is turned in his stomach. It is venom of cobras within him. He swallows down riches and vomits them up again and casts them out of his belly. So he's picturing a wicked person as swallowing up evil and enjoying the taste. And it's so good and delicious, but it gives him food poisoning. And the end result is he's going to throw it all up, and he's going to be in a terrible condition. Verse 17, he will not look upon the rivers, the streams flowing with honey and curds. He will give back the fruit of his toil, and will not swallow it down from the profit of his trading. He will get no enjoyment, for he has crushed and abandoned the poor. He has seized a house that he did not build, because he knew no contentment in his belly. He will not let anything in which he delights escape him. You notice that, by the way, that? He's abandoned the poor. He seized a house that wasn't his. He never knew contentment. He doesn't let anything that delights him escapes him. He just grabs everything he can. He's just a greedy, lustful individual. He's saying these things to a man who we will later learn constantly gave to the poor and took care of people and loved people and never let anybody be in that condition, and yet he wickedly says these things. Verse 22, in the fullness of his sufficiency he will be in distress. The hand of everyone in misery will come against him. To fill his belly to the full, God will send his burning anger against him and rain it upon him into his body. That's what's happened to you, Job. He will flee from an iron weapon. A bronze arrow will strike him through. It is drawn forth, comes out of his body. The glittering point comes out of his gallbladder. Terrors come upon him. So far, thank you very much. But I appreciate what's going to happen to me. There's going to be this bronze arrow that's going to pierce my gallbladder and come out the other side. What a pleasant thought that he's giving him here. And so verse 26, utter darkness is laid up for his treasures. A fire not fanned will devour him. What is left in his tent will be consumed. The heavens will reveal his iniquity, and the earth will rise up against him. The possessions of his house be carried away and dragged off in the day of God's wrath. This is the wicked man's portion from God, the heritage decreed for him by God. This is what happens to the wicked. And so he's just saying that prosperity of the wicked is short-lived. He's going to be forgotten. His children are going to beg. His useful strength will lie down in the dust. All his good that he's done will vanish. And then this is the wicked man's portion from God. So there's that end result. All right. Finally, there's just a few things we'll notice here in Job's reply in chapter 21. And his big summary is, the wicked don't always suffer. And that's pretty obvious. So we'll see how he lays that out. I love verses 2 and 3. Keep listening to my words, and let this be your comfort. Bear with me, I will speak, and after I've spoken, mock on. That's a great reversal. You're supposed to be here to give me comfort, and I am finding that all my great speeches are comforting you. You're having such a blast with them. You're having so much fun with them that just let me give one more speech, and then you can mock on again. What a blast you're having here while I'm suffering. Things are getting a little testy here, aren't they? You can see this. Verse 4, as for me, is my complaint against man? Why should I not be impatient? So in other words, my complaint is against God. Since God has the power to do something about this, why shouldn't I be impatient? I'm not talking to you guys. Verse 5, look at me and be appalled and lay your hand over your mouth. If you'll just take a look at me, you need to just see how bad off I am and then be quiet. That'd be the best thing you could do. Verse 6, when I remember, I am dismayed and shuddering seizes my flesh. When Job remembers what he used to be, how terrible it was. Now his questions, 7 through 18. Why do the wicked live, reach old age, and grow mighty in power? Their offspring are established in their presence, and their descendants before their eyes. Their houses are safe from fear, and no rod of God is upon them. Their bull breeds without fail, their cow calves, and does not miscarry. They send out their little boys like a flock, and their children dance. They sing to the tambourine, the lyre, and rejoice to the sound of the pipe. They spend their days in prosperity, and in peace they go down to the Sheol. They say to God, depart from us. We do not desire the knowledge of your ways. What is the Almighty? What is that we should serve him? And what profit do we get if we pray to him? Behold, is not their prosperity in their hand? The counsel of the wicked is far from him. You see how they're arguing? Yeah, he says, Job says, the wicked go, I don't need God. I've got my own strength. I'm producing this. I get everything happen. Look at me. I can do this. I don't need God. And yet what happens? Nothing. They just keep living in prosperity. So verse 17, how often is it that the lamp of the wicked is put out? How often do they get whacked because they're so evil, that their calamity comes upon them, that God distributes pains in his anger? See any wicked people living like I'm having to live, is what Job is saying? That they are like straw before the wind and like chaff that that the storm carries away. And then verse 19 through 21, you say God stores up their iniquity for their children. Let him pay it out to them that they may know it. Let their own eyes see their destruction and let them drink of the wrath of the Almighty. For what do they care for their houses after them when the number of the months is cut off? You see what he's saying? He says, I know what you're saying. You're saying the wrath that should go to the person who is wicked is laid on the children afterwards. And Job says, well, if you know the wicked, they die and go, at least I didn't have to go through it. I don't care what happened after me. As a matter of fact, I'm dead. I don't know what happened after me. He says, that doesn't do any good. That's not any kind of comfort. Why are you saying this? So then, 22 through 26, he says, consider these two different deaths. Will any teach God knowledge, seeing that he judges those who are on high? That's what the friends had said. He judges the angels. One dies in his full vigor, being wholly at ease and secure. His pails full of milk, and the marrow of his bones moist. Another dies in bitterness of soul, never having tasted of prosperity. They lie down alike in the dust, and the worms cover them. Which one of these lived a more enjoyable life? No, the one who lived in prosperity. And you guys say the one who lived in prosperity was the good guy, but in this particular case, he's not necessarily the good guy. And he laid down in the dust just like the guy who lived a life of just misery. And he was possibly a good guy. So you can't look at this. It all ends up the same way and then draw conclusions from it. So by looking at their lives and their deaths, who really had the better life? And who can make sense of this? God's ways are beyond our understanding. Finally, 27 through 34. Behold, I know your thoughts and your schemes to wrong me. Turning to the friends again. For you say, where is the house of the prince? Where is the tent in which the wicked live? Have you not asked those who travel the roads, and do you not accept their testimony that the evil man is spared in the day of calamity, that he is rescued in the day of wrath? All right, simply put, Job says, this is a really pretty simple, just walk out on the nearby road and ask anybody who walks by if wicked people don't live a pretty good life most of the time. That's a pretty easy answer. And Job says, you guys don't know what you're talking about. All right? And then verse 29, verse 30, 31. Who declares his way to his face? And who repays him for what he has done? That is, who repays this wicked man? Doesn't necessarily happen. When he's carried to the grave, a watch is kept over his tomb. He's so wealthy they even watch after him and take care of him after he dies. The clods of the valley are sweet to him. All mankind follows after him, and those who go before him are innumerable. People see his wonderful life, even though he is wicked, and they follow that pattern because they expect the same kind of joy. And 34, how then will you comfort me with empty nothings? There is nothing left of your answers but falsehood. That is the problem. He repeats basically and says what Ecclesiastes later says in chapter 8, verse 11, because the sentence against an evil deed is not executed speedily, the heart of the children of man is fully set to do evil. God doesn't bring judgment right away. There's no such thing as retribution theology where God zaps a person because of sin. In fact, I've known many who put confidence in whatever belief or faith they have, even if it's not in God, and say, this is the reason I'm wealthy. This is the reason I'm doing so well. So let's draw a lesson conclusion here. The answer to Job's cry is what we've been talking about on Sunday morning. The answer to Job's cry is the kingdom of God. And that is very, very important for us to recognize. It is in the kingdom that the righteous are vindicated, not necessarily in this life. It is in the kingdom that God comes to the defense of his people. That day is going to come. It's in the kingdom that God's going to prove his own righteousness, his own life and actions as worthy of praise and honor and glory. That's going to happen in the kingdom. It's in the kingdom that God brings those who are his to share in his glory. That's what the kingdom is all about. Paul says it in 2 Corinthians 4:17. For this light momentary affliction. Think Job would have thought of it that way? Not likely. But Paul went through some pretty serious stuff. And he says, if you compare, no matter how bad it is, if you compare it to what's going to come, this light momentary affliction is preparing us for an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison. Our trials are light in comparison to the glory to come, and they are also preparing us to appreciate the eternal weight of that glory. I think that's cool. All hope. You just can't get too down when you remember God is there. He's never deserting you. And this is preparing you for the most wonderful kingdom that you can imagine. All tears wiped away. No more pain. Glory and honor at the right hand of the King of Kings. That's what it's about. Beautiful, beautiful picture, and something that this book gives us hope for. All right, let's go ahead and take a moment, and we will enjoy a song together. Obviously, if there's any way we can help you, please take that opportunity to talk to us, step forward, or talk to us afterwards. We would love to help in any way we can. Let's stand and sing.